Breaking right now, Ibrahim Traore just sent a direct message to Uganda that has everyone talking. And it's not just talk anymore. The United Nations just leaked a confidential report that exposes what Yoweri Museveni has really been planning behind closed doors. This isn't about diplomacy. This is about power, control, and a chess game being played across the entire African continent. What Traore knows, what Museveni is hiding, and what this means for the future of East and West Africa. You need to hear every word of this because the implications are massive and they're unfolding right now. Let's get the context straight before we dive into what just happened. Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, has been making waves across Africa since taking power. He's 35 years old, a military captain turned president, and he's been challenging the old guard, the colonial powers, and anyone who stands in the way of what he calls true African sovereignty. Traore has become a symbol, a voice for a new generation that's tired of corruption, tired of outside interference, and tired of leaders who've been in power for decades without delivering real change. On the other side, you have Yoweri Museveni, Uganda's president since 1986. That's 38 years in power. Museveni is a veteran, a political strategist who's seen leaders come and go, coups rise and fall, and international politics shift like sand. He's aligned himself carefully with Western powers, played the regional stability card, and positioned Uganda as a key ally in East Africa. But Traore doesn't play by those rules. And now these two very different leaders are on a collision course. Here's what happened in the last 72 hours. Sources close to the Burkina Faso presidency confirmed that Ibrahim Traore held a private video conference with senior officials from the African Union and representatives from several East African nations. During that meeting, Traore reportedly issued what insiders are calling a diplomatic warning directed specifically at Uganda. The exact words haven't been made public yet, but according to three separate sources who were briefed on the call, Traore made it clear that he's watching what's happening in the region and he's not staying silent. Why Uganda? Why now? That's the question everyone's asking. And the answer lies in a document that just surfaced. A leaked United Nations internal assessment dated less than 2 weeks ago, detailing what the UN privately believes is happening behind the scenes in Kampala. The report, which has not been officially released but has been verified by multiple diplomatic sources, lays out a pattern of behavior that suggests Museveni is executing a long-term strategy that goes far beyond Uganda's borders. The document describes what it calls strategic economic and military positioning across Central and East Africa. According to the UN assessment, Museveni has been quietly expanding Uganda's influence through a combination of military deployments, economic agreements, and diplomatic pressure on smaller neighboring states. The report specifically mentions troop movements into the Democratic Republic of Congo under the guise of peacekeeping operations, but with dual purposes that include securing mineral-rich territories and establishing permanent Ugandan military presence in strategically vital areas. But it doesn't stop there. The leaked UN report goes further. It details financial agreements that Uganda has signed with foreign corporations, many of them linked to Western interests, that grant exclusive access to natural resources in exchange for military and logistical support. The report uses careful language, but the implication is clear. Museveni is positioning Uganda not just as a regional power, but as a gateway for external actors who want access to Africa's wealth without the messy optics of direct intervention. Now, here's where it gets even more intense. The UN document includes a section on what it calls influence operations targeting West African nations. And this is where Ibrahim Traore enters the picture. According to the assessment, Ugandan intelligence services have been working with international partners to monitor and, in some cases, actively undermine the stability of governments that challenge the status quo. The report doesn't name Burkina Faso directly, but diplomatic analysts who've reviewed the document say the descriptions match perfectly with the kind of pressure Traore's administration has been facing since he came to power. Think about what this means. Traore kicked out French forces. He challenged the economic frameworks that have kept Burkina Faso tied to former colonial powers. He's forged new alliances with Russia, with Mali, with Niger. He's become the face of a movement that's spreading across the Sahel, a movement that directly threatens the interests of those who've benefited from keeping Africa divided and dependent. And if Museveni is playing the role the UN report suggests, then he's not just a regional leader. He's a gatekeeper, an enforcer for a system that Traore is trying to dismantle. Sources inside the African Union say that Traore's message to Uganda wasn't a threat. It was a signal. A clear statement that he knows what's happening, that he's not intimidated, and that he's prepared to respond if Uganda's activities cross certain red lines. One AU official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said Traore's exact words during the conference were chilling in their calm precision. "We see you," Traore reportedly said, "and we will not But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Late yesterday, a second leak emerged. This one didn't come from the UN. It came from within the Ugandan government itself. A whistleblower, identity protected, released internal communications showing that Museveni's inner circle has been deeply concerned about Traore for months. The documents show discussions about containment strategies and counter-narrative operations, specifically targeting the growing influence of what they call radical sovereignty movements in West Africa. One memo, dated 6 weeks ago, discusses the need to isolate and delegitimize emerging leaders who threaten regional stability and partnership frameworks. While Traore isn't named directly, the memo references the Burkina situation and suggests coordinating with international partners to ensure that alternative governance models don't gain traction beyond their current borders. This is explosive, because what it shows is that the concern isn't just about Uganda's interests. It's about a coordinated effort involving multiple actors, multiple nations, and multiple agendas, all converging on the same goal: stopping leaders like Traore from succeeding. Because if Traore succeeds, if Burkina Faso thrives under his leadership, if the model of breaking free from external control actually works, then it becomes a blueprint. And that blueprint threatens everything the old system is built on. So let's hear from different sides. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a professor of African political systems at the University of Accra, gave her analysis this morning. What we're witnessing is a generational clash, she said. Museveni represents the old guard, the liberation fighters who took power decades ago and never let go. They built their legitimacy on fighting colonialism, but then they replicated many of the same power structures. Traore represents something new. He's not asking for permission. He's not playing by the diplomatic rules that were written by the very powers he's challenging. That makes him dangerous to the established order, but inspiring to millions of young Africans who see themselves in him. But not everyone agrees. Ambassador Charles Mutebi, a former Ugandan diplomat, pushed back strongly. This narrative that paints Museveni as some kind of puppet is deeply unfair and frankly ignorant of history, he said in an interview this afternoon. President Museveni has maintained stability in Uganda for nearly 4 decades. He's brought economic growth, infrastructure development, and regional peace. Yes, he works with international partners. That's called pragmatic leadership. The alternative isn't some romantic revolution, it's chaos. It's what we see in countries that reject cooperation and end up isolated and impoverished. Then there's the view from the ground. Social media across Africa has exploded with reactions. The hashtag Traore vs Museveni has been trending for 18 hours straight. In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, crowds gathered in the streets yesterday evening, waving flags and chanting support for their president. Videos show young people holding signs that read, "Africa decides" and "No more puppets." In Kampala, the response has been more muted, but pro-government rallies were organized quickly, with speakers defending Museveni's record and warning against what they call reckless leadership that destabilizes the continent. Let me paint the picture of what's happening on the ground right now, because this isn't just about politics. This is about people, about hope, about fear. In the villages outside Ouagadougou, farmers who've struggled for years under economic systems that favor exports over local needs are talking about Traore like he's a prophet. An old woman named Fatima, interviewed by a local journalist, said through tears, "For the first time, I believe my grandchildren might have a future here, in our own country, not dreaming of escaping to Europe." In Kampala's markets, the mood is different. Traders who've built their businesses on stability, on predictable relationships with foreign investors, are worried. "We don't need more conflict," said one business owner who didn't want to be named. "Uganda has peace. We have growth. Why should we care what some young revolutionary in West Africa thinks about how we run our country?" The emotional divide runs deep, and it's not just between nations. It's within families, within communities, within the hearts of people trying to figure out what kind of Africa they want to live in. Do you choose the stability of the known, even if it means compromising sovereignty? Or do you gamble on the promise of true independence, even if the path is uncertain and dangerous? Now let's talk about what happens next, because this situation is escalating fast. Military analysts report unusual troop movements along the borders of several Central African nations. Uganda has increased its military presence in the DRC by an estimated 12% in the last month alone. That's according to satellite imagery analyzed by the International Crisis Group. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the 3 nations forming what's being called the Alliance of Sahel States, have announced joint military exercises scheduled for next month. The economic implications are staggering. Foreign investors are watching closely. A report from the African Development Bank released just this morning warns that escalating tensions between different governance models in East and West Africa could lead to capital flight and reduced foreign direct investment across the continent. Stock markets in Nairobi and Lagos have shown increased volatility over the past week. But there's another layer to this. China has been conspicuously quiet. Beijing has significant investments in both Uganda and Burkina Faso. Chinese state media has published exactly 2 brief articles on the situation, both carefully neutral in tone. Analysts believe China is watching to see which way the wind blows before committing to a position. Russia, on the other hand, has been more vocal. Russian state media has run several pieces sympathetic to Traore's position, framing the conflict as African nations asserting independence against neo-colonial pressure. The United States State Department issued a statement yesterday calling for dialogue and restraint, but stopped short of taking sides. European Union representatives have been more direct, with the EU's chief diplomat warning against destabilizing rhetoric without naming specific leaders. France, notably, has said almost nothing publicly, though sources suggest intense diplomatic activity behind the scenes. Here's what most people don't know yet. There's a third document, and this one might be the most significant of all. A proposal that was circulated among African Union members 3 months ago, before any of this became public. The proposal, authored by a coalition of younger African leaders and civil society organizations, calls for a fundamental restructuring of how African nations interact with foreign powers. It advocates for collective bargaining, resource sovereignty, and new frameworks for military and economic partnerships that prioritize African interests. The proposal was quietly shelved. Older leaders, including Museveni, reportedly opposed it strongly, arguing it was unrealistic and would damage relationships that have taken decades to build. But Traore? He was one of its strongest supporters, and sources say he hasn't given up on it. In fact, some believe that his recent actions are part of a broader strategy to revive that proposal, to build momentum for a fundamental shift in how Africa engages with the world. If that's true, then what we're watching isn't just a diplomatic spat between 2 leaders. It's the opening move in a much larger game, a game about the future direction of an entire continent, a game where the stakes are measured not in political points, but in the lives and futures of over 1 billion people. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. What kind of Africa do you want to see? An Africa that plays it safe, that maintains stability through compromise and partnership with external powers? Or an Africa that takes risks, that demands sovereignty even when the path is uncertain? There's no easy answer. Both sides have valid points. Both sides have real concerns. But one thing is absolutely certain. What happens between Ibrahim Traore and Yoweri Museveni in the coming weeks and months will shape the trajectory of African politics for the next generation. The signal has been sent. The hidden agendas are being exposed. And the response, whatever it is, will echo across the continent. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Are you Team Traore or Team Museveni? Do you think Africa needs revolutionary change or steady stability? And what do you think happens next? Share this video because people need to understand what's really happening. This is history unfolding in real time, and we're all witnesses to it. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned because this story is far from over.